Our first reader is a queer poet and lifelong Chicagoan. They serve as poetry editor for Tinderbox Poetry Journal and as a relationship health educator with youth. Their work is published or forthcoming in Pinwheel, Cotton Xenomorph, Glass Poetry, and elsewhere. They want to know if you have any theories on when Carly Rae Jepsen will finally release her new album. Please welcome Levi Todd.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I wrote that bio 2 weeks ago, so I can tell you now Carly Rae Jepsen's new album is coming out May 18th. Mark your calendars. I actually, if this is something that would interest you, my friend Beza Ozer and I are organizing a reading where poets are going to receive one song from the new album, and everybody has to write a poem in response to it. So if that interests you, you should talk to me after the show. All right, so let's read some poems. Do you all want to do something with me? I just like to establish the space just so that we all feel like we're together. So if you can think of the name of somebody that you miss really dearly, so think about that person who you miss, and on the count of 3, we're all going to say that person's name together. But we all have to be on time, so no one's like very vulnerable and saying it just by themselves. All right, so are we ready? I'll say 1, 2, 3, and then you can go. So 1, 2, 3, Chris! Great, thank you for inviting them into the space. They're here with you now. They're listening to poems with you. Okay, so let's get into it. This is kind of like a poem, essay, weird thing. I ride my bike a lot. That's like how I get around, and I feel very connected to my bike because of that. And I've been thinking a lot about bodies and the shapes that bodies can and can't have. And I feel like I've often like written negatively about them, and I wanted to write something a little bit more reclamatory. So this doesn't have a title right now. I don't know what to do with my hands. It could be said that in my lifetime, I've had the pleasure of beholding several bodies. And yes, I do mean the intriguing figure which suggests every 7 or so years your skin cells die and replenish anew so that there's a whole other you striding around in your shoes. I also mean that in my lifetime, I have had 6 or so bikes that I have loved devotedly before they were broken or stolen. I debate each time whether to name them, but each time must consider if I am naming a new thing or renaming myself. Yesterday, I spent 1/6 of my waking hours bound to or balanced on or buoyed atop my bike as I delivered myself to work and to nourishment and to my beloveds. If I walked there with my gangliness of limbs, I would rely upon my body. If I rode the bus then, do I offer it the invitation of joining my body? Because for 3 hours I remained connected to aluminum and carbon and cork, did it not become an extension of myself? Because I so feared the impact of an opening car door, because my chain slipped and sent a rattle through my spine, did I not fear for its safety the way I fear for my own? This much is also true. I neglect my bike in the same way I neglect myself. I left it alone all night in the rain and will only regret it when the rust unribbons itself across my frame. I deny myself rest and only regret it when ache unspools itself across my frame. I am learning how to care for a body in all its shapes. I rub the loofah across my legs to rid myself of an old skin. I rub the cloth across my fork to shed the street's grit. I spread lotion across my face so I might stay soft. I drip oil around my cog so I remain smooth. I am vowing to care for this body until I can no more. And on days when I feel a small hurt because of the body I do not have, I eat a plump clementine and it becomes me. I hold a mewling, demanding kitten and she becomes me. I remain open and inviting, and in this my body never ends. No dams, only deltas feeding into a wider ocean. I billow down Fullerton Avenue, pedaling towards some destination, and perhaps I pass you, too wide, too much, too fast to be seen. So the next poems that I'm going to read are, thank you. Oh, this is a fancy music stand. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there we go.
Great. Yeah, y'all can snap, clap, do whatever you want. There's no rules or rhymes or reasons. Okay, so I'm working on this series of poems where I take the etymologies of words that like I associate with gender and find out like what's at the root of those words. The project started taking words I associate with masculinity, and as my feelings and attitudes about gender have shifted, it's kind of just become more of a general exploratory project. So I'm gonna read about like 5 or 6 of those. And the titles are just gonna be the word itself, and I'm not gonna read the full etymology because they're usually very long, but I will like pull out the parts that I thought were interesting. So this is a poem about a bunch of very like bro-y dudes I used to work with in Muncie, Indiana, which is a real treasure. I do love Muncie a great deal. I don't love the boys in this poem so much. So the title of this poem is Testosterone, and the root of it is one that stands by or witnesses. Or witness, sorry. These college boys are holding court with a beer in each hand. These Cinderellas know they only have until 2 a.m. to fight, to kiss, to cry. If it happens before then, it never happened. Alexei is on the roof, leaping into the next bed of shingles and turning the phone line into a slingshot. Turner is being consoled in the corner, his shoulders drooping from their stiff pillars. Dylan is playing chicken with Ben, the inevitable punchline that they both rush the liquored peck at the end. It's only a joke if people laugh. The other Ben is far, far gone, is wielding the small axe he was gifted and aiming at the dartboard. Suddenly, everyone is sober. Yes, it clatters as it ricochets to the floor, everyone jumping up as though evading a scurrying mouse. He aims again, buries the blade off-center. Mike jokingly encourages him to pick the darts up instead, and this is how it ends. Mike slammed to the floor, holding his head as though trying to keep the yoke in. Ben above him, heaving while the righteous vulture soars through his veins. The dartboard releases the axe, its head hitting the floor like a gavel. No one will be called to the stand. The jury has a reputation for being too forgiving. In case anyone was wondering, Lori Lightfoot is in the lead with 75% of the vote, with 344 precincts reporting. Don't love that, but exciting new era for Chicago's politics. Melissa Conyers-Evers is leading for treasurer. And I'm a dork, and I'm going to be refreshing my phone all night, seeing those numbers adjust. All right, next poem. The etymology of stubble is actually referring to, it's like, what's it called? Farms, I guess. That's the word I'm looking for. But it refers to like when things are reaped, like what the scythe or what the blade, whatever you're using to reap, cannot reach to. So it's stumps of grain stalks left in the ground after reaping. I'm going to repeat a line in this poem. The one that's repeated that you'll hear in a second is originally from a great poet named Jamie Mortara. Every hair on my body is a man. The choice is whether to raise them or razor them. When the blade gathers the men like dust in a clean home, I revel in how I feel a cool river when my legs brush up against each other, dousing the small flint-born fires when the forest grows dry. In 6th grade, my neighbor lectured we would not kill the weeds unless we got to the roots, that simply cutting the tops would let the creeping Charlie grow back hardier and with a vendetta. I cannot uproot myself from this sick dirt. I still insist on dragging the small scythe across my skin. Which is crueler, that they grow or that I forbid them? I can tolerate them as boys. After a single day of barrenness and quiet, they erupt, yes, but they learn to soften under a gentle touch. It is when they grow tall I realize I no longer recognize them. They talk back to their mother. They wish to grow as tall as their father. If every hair on my body is a man, then I am a ruthless parent who eats their young in the name of survival. Learn how I say, not how I do. But the men don't fear me. They know this morning I shaved my legs and ran out of both time and hot water to rid myself of anyone else. So I work with a lot of young people, and I work with like middle schoolers and high schoolers. And this like cool thing happens after they get to know us for a while. They like start, like we have rapport, we catch up. It's not just like who's the stranger in my classroom. What that means is the young boys and men try to like greet me with handshakes, which I appreciate. And I never know what to do because there's a lot of different handshakes, and there's like cultural like influences on what those handshakes look like at each school. And it's this like very tender thing that I want to be able to be good at, and I know I will never be good at. And so this is a poem where I'm trying to like hold tenderness for how sweet of a like moment it is, but also how it will always be messed up. The etymology of grip is to seize or obtain. Knowing that this is likely the one time ever that me and a new strange man will touch, I feel a certain guilt when the inevitable failure happens, the potential intimacy dropped and floundering on the floor like a gilled thing. I rack my brain for the index of handshakes, tattered and fading, my fingers slipping through holes. This unspoken treaty requires we both read each other, estimate what kind of men we are, if at all, whether to extend hands and tersely shake, distance kept, or rather, to clasp palms wound against the thumbs and slip into fingertips. Or perhaps just clap and bump knuckles. I'm telling you, they want to know whether I am one of them, and what kind, which ranks I march with, whose allegiance I pledge, and I have no answer. The proof is in the fumble. Still, I would like to give this moment the chance it deserves. We could make it work, I think. I think we could. But there are so many options, and knowing which one to pick, like the rosiest apple from the bin, would require me to get to know them enough to do this a second time. I've got three left. I've been thinking a lot about voice lately, especially because in this last year I've been teaching and I have to use my voice a lot. And before I was teaching, I was doing like customer service stuff. And what is interesting about those things is that when I was using my customer service voice on the phone, I would get ma'amed a lot. And now when I'm in school spaces, they're like one of the few spaces that still require like adults to be addressed as like Mr. and Mrs. And so there's a lot of ways I think like voice, I mean obviously, but voice is like a very gendered thing. So I'm gonna read two poems about voice. One is baritone, so for people who don't know like choral stuff, baritone is like a deep register, and tenor is usually the highest pitch for people with like deeper voices, and it's, I think tenor and then alto is the next highest. I'm seeing nods, I appreciate all you affirming people nodding. So we'll do baritone first, and the etymology of baritone is heavy. I finish a day of teaching and my voice is a steel basin buried deep in a well. Everything cast into it echoes back, coated in gravel, rumble in the throat, treading water above the choke. I wish for a reed instrument and I get brass, brash and rational, what I need for class. Everyone tells me I'm getting teacher voice and I hear cannons. I cough up gunpowder and wet it with spit, snuff out the flames before they're born. I smooth out my rough edges when speaking with friends and they ask me to speak up. Political scientists bet who win elections based on their base. That's math you can trust. That's a timber you can trust. I coax out a song and all that comes out is croak. Every falsetto false. My students don't listen to soft. They can't hear cooing. They only quiet clamor when I caw. I cough and can't clear the boulder. The cashier mams me until I order, then is unsure. I'm firmly heard as sir. My voice is a hardened muscle I can't unflex. I put on my teacher voice in the classroom and it clings all day. I'm never alone because he wants to stay. You know what I'm saying? And this is tenor. The etymology of tenor is purpose or a holding on. Erica, the senator's aide, mams me on the phone, then hems, her apology tripping over its own feet like she's made a mistake. I keep my flush of joy close and my cheeks turn pomegranates. I pry them open and nibble as I tell her not to worry, and I'd like to leave a message for the senator. My voice and myself are prone to softening in the warmth of those we trust or could imagine trusting. Is this a loosening, easing up the too tight shoelaces, or rather a becoming, a birth, a buoy floating to the surface? If we both closed our eyes, we could imagine anyone on the other end of the line, new selves blooming like cacti in the cover of night. I live through the receiver, through this machine that allows us to communicate without closeness. How sound is surely an act of magic I will allow myself to be swept up in. I don't understand which spell will summon me. All I know is I come when I'm called. Erica doesn't know it, but while she takes my address for verification purposes, our voices are playing jump rope with phone lines, skipping down circuit boards, sharing pomegranates without their silly bodies, without their rigid faces that cannot change. And yes, I would like to stay. To make this conversation drag long enough that Erica questions whether she did in fact make a mistake, whether she heard me right the first time I said my name. So before I read this last poem, I'm going to do the promotion thing. You can follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, at Levi, C-I, the letters Todd. I also have a website, which is levitodd.com, if you want to read more of my poems. I also have essays and interviews up there. If you want to get in touch after the reading, I'd love to chat with you. And it's National Poetry Month, so yay poets. I had like a scary moment on the train last week, which is like average. But it just reminds me of this word, faggot, which is like a very powerful word. I have conversations with my students a lot about it. It's such a funny word. The etymology is like a bundle of sticks, and sometimes kids are really snarky, like, I'm not cussing, I'm saying it's a bundle of sticks. But the reason it's like a bundle of sticks is because like when it was like witch hunting eras, bundles of sticks were used to burn heretics or like queer people. So that's like a sad, scary thing, but stay with me, trust me, it's gonna be reclaimed by the end. So yeah, the etymology of faggot is bundle of twigs bound up as punishment for a heretic. I trust no religion that claims to have answers. It is too easily weaponized by the boys terrified of their questions. I have few answers, which is perhaps why they are terrified, perhaps why they terrorize. I find no shame in being bound together with my kin. What ferocious kindling, what potential. Yes, I catch a spark on my tongue and let it spread in the heat through the entire field. Burn it down, I say, start over. Ash makes the best fertilizer to host some small, fragile seed before it pops like a kernel and turns into green. Thank you, everyone.